22, I was driving in North Michigan on a cold Tuesday evening in the month of November, just about a week before Thanksgiving in the year of 2018. I stopped off at a blacktop road onto a gravel, which I followed just far enough to get my 2016 Ford pickup out of immediate sight, should a cop turn his headlights down the road in my direction. As soon as my truck turned a corner, I slammed on the brakes, and the thing came to a sliding halt. Quickly, I jumped out of the truck, remembering to lock the door, more out of habit than any other reason. Then I was climbing over an old barbed wire fence, unzipping while at the same time glancing over my shoulder to look for any sign of lights coming this way. There were none. It was crispy and breezy that evening, and the moon wasn't full, but it was still bright enough to illuminate the night. I hadn't even thought about grabbing a flashlight when I left the truck. It was certainly one of those times when taking care of bodily functions was more important than worrying about if you stepped in some raccoon poop or something just as silly. There was a clear field of vision from my location to where my truck sat waiting. So I would have been fine if I would have finished pissing, and then I would have walked back to my truck and been on my way. But I didn't do that because of the girl's voice. I couldn't see her, but she sounded like she was incredibly close, like just a few feet away from me. So close, in fact, that initially I was so embarrassed that I had been standing there pissing just seconds before that it overcame my usual cautious nature. I mean, she sounded like she was just on the other side of that limb that was blocking my view. So I moved the limb, and that was when it became clear that she was just one more step or two into the forest. And then once I had moved a couple of tall weeds, I could see what the girl looked like. She was saying something, and I couldn't quite make out what she was saying, but it sounded inviting and friendly. What was she saying exactly? What I should have been asking myself was, what was a female doing out here in the definition of the middle of nowhere, in the near dark, watching me take a piss? I followed her another step, and then another. Then, just as I was just sure she'd be behind the next patch of weeds, she was not. And suddenly I noticed that it was no longer a bright night. There were shadows towering over me and all around. I felt a sense of being lost, and I struggled to gain my direction of where my vehicle was located. I thought I could still find my way back to my truck. At the same time, the girl's voice had not grown any softer. It was louder, in fact. But I still could not understand exactly what it was that she was saying. I took a couple of seconds to look around, and I noticed I could no longer see my truck. While unsettling, to be certain, I was still, I thought, very close to the gravel road. So I wasn't really lost. I just had that feeling because I had wandered further than I had intended. The shadows which had overtaken me loomed over ever more threateningly now that my focus was on my surroundings and not on the girl. I heard a rustling in the woods not far from my location, but coming from a different direction than the girl's voice. At that point, my caution side was overtaking any interest I had in finding out what sort of attractive lady might be associated with the voice which could not be understood, but was very teasing in its nature. And I won't lie, I really wanted to see her, to hear her well enough to understand what she was saying, with those flirty, kind-sounding noises that she was making. But all of a sudden I was being saturated with adrenaline, and my gears went straight to fight or flight. I started backing up in the direction from which I thought I had come. At that moment was when I saw it. I didn't know what had happened to her, but I had an idea that if anything did happen to her, that it was this thing which was responsible. It had antlers, like a deer, but its face was something different. It was an animal skull with sickly skin stretched tightly around the bone, and it had sunken eyes that had a faint red to them when seen in the dark. Its body was thin, almost, or possibly even emancipated. It had a tall stature and seemed to lurch drunkenly across the ground rather than walk. As it took a stride, it seemed to jiggle in an unusual way that gave the appearance like the entire body was going to fall on over. But then it would catch itself, get righted, and as much as I think was possible for the thing, and then it would lurch forward another step. I was terrified, having no idea how far I had been led into the forest, or for that matter, if I was even still in the woods which I had started. Suddenly I felt my feet were caught up in the roots which had covered the ground. Were they grasping my feet and ankles? Before I could answer that question I had asked myself in my head, the thing motioned with twiggy-like arms, with their clawed hands, and suddenly there appeared two large wolves, one on each side of its rackety body. The two new animals to arrive had the head of a wolf, but their bodies were more like a mix between that of a man and a wolf, and they stood upright. Their upper torso was very human-like, but more muscular, while the lower part of their torsos had the unmistakable bent legs which are found on the back of any dog or wolf. They were covered in gray and black fur, which was much healthier looking in patches than in other parts of their body. They reeked a stench that is only found on something that has been dead for a long while. The two snarled, and I saw the saliva dripping from their mouths. Their eyes were yellow, surrounding a black, dead-looking center. They were the eyes of a shark. They were dead-looking and without mercy. They had a deep growl, and I could see their muscles tense as they prepared to leap after me. I wrenched my feet free while not taking my eyes off the two wolf-like creatures. When the things with antlers started motioning towards me, I began to turn and run. The sound of the wolf creatures giving chase made my blood turn cold, but I did not falter. Screaming as loud as possible, I flew down the path back the way I had come. I didn't dare look back. At one point, I thought I could actually feel the hot breath of one of those wolves on the back of my neck, and I suppose it could have been my own sweat. But at the time, I thought worried that it was the wolf's saliva falling on the nape of my neck. Now I was almost back to the gravel road where I had stopped my truck. Behind, I could hear the wolves still coming, but they seemed to be a little further away. Still, I had the fence between me and the safety of my pickup. I heard a growl to my back and to the right, so I steered left and jumped up on the fence and propelled myself onwards over the obstacle, and I hit the ground running. Now, out on the gravel road, I could see that I had misjudged where my car was located, and it was about half a football field away down the road from where I was located. And I began running towards my car. There was something beyond the car which had come out of the forest from the same side as myself. Although now it was on all fours, the black fur was unmistakable. I was certain it was one of the wolves. Where was the other one? The wolf I could see started running down the road towards me in an attempt, I would assume, to cut me off from reaching my car. Meantime, I was already at full run, reaching in my pocket for my keys. I pulled them out just as I arrived at my car door, and then I began what was probably the most dramatic few seconds of a very dramatic few minutes. Out of the corner of my eye, I was keeping track of that wolf as it raced towards me, while at the same time trying to concentrate on not dropping my keys after I got the door unlocked. Out of the corner of my eye, I was keeping track of that wolf as it was racing towards me, while at the same time trying to concentrate on not dropping my keys after I got the door unlocked. I was going to need them right away as soon as I got into the car. The anxiety was unbearable. The wolf was sprinting towards me at full speed, trying to get the keys into the slot, wondering if that other wolf would come charging up out of the woods directly behind from where I was located, my back to the spot where it would most likely come. I wanted it to just melt right there, so close to safety. Just give up and let them devour me. And perhaps it was bravery, but more likely fear. But somehow I managed to get the keys into the door before anything had reached me. Once I got the key into the lock, the door swung open, and I was inside and closing that door quickly, and then locking it with my left hand as my right hand was quickly getting those keys into the ignition. I was already looking up the road when the wolf came even with my car door, and I gunned the gas and almost caused myself to fishtail off the road into a wreck, but I was able to get the car straightened out. I sped away from there more frightened than I've ever been in my life. Gaining control of the car, beginning to speed my way out of that area, I allowed myself to glance over towards the side of the forest where I had just come out of. To my amazement, the other wolf was so far keeping pace with my car as I was picking up speed. It came jumping over the fence and angling towards me, but by then I was well underway and I shot into the dark, never to see those things again. Thanks a lot for listening.